Hello guys, welcome back to another 10 underrated commander cards. I try to keep these lists, these videos fresh for you guys, but if I do repeat any of these cards, just keep in mind it's been a while since I probably did the previous video with one of them in it, but all of these I still believe, as of the making of this video, are pretty underrated. I think it is in order of colors I tend to do that. We're going to start it off here with the first colorless card, which is Hazoret's Monument. Now with the other monuments, in particular Bantu's Monument and Oketra's Monument, I feel like those two are the most popular in Commander. A lot of token strategies, a lot of life gain strategies, very popular in the format. However, I think Hazoret's Monument gets overlooked, but it's still very good. You have a loot here. You have to discard first, so it's maybe not as good as some other looting. It's great if you have a graveyard strategy, if you have anything that you can get back from your graveyard pretty easily. It's usually not that big of a deal. You don't even have to worry about playing red creatures in here, which is the good thing about the monument cards. I believe I had a Teshar Ancestors Apostle deck. Threw this in it. Yeah, I don't have any red creatures in that deck, but it's still great. You get a loot, you get creatures in your graveyard, you can bring them back. It's an awesome card. Next we have Board the Weatherlight. Dominaria is kind of a weird set because you have the whole historic card specification. You just look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal a historic card, you get to put that in your hand, and then you put the rest on the bottom of your library. If you're having a problem figuring out where to put this, just put it in an artifact deck like Sidri, Galvanic Genius, or Sharum the Hegemon, or even Abrea. I am a budget player, meaning I do play a lot of commander decks, so I'm not going to be spending hundreds of dollars on those decks. I would rather just throw in some good value staples at the uncommon, common value from current sets that are just going to do what they're supposed to do. You know, you get to dig 5 deep into the top of your deck and get a card that you're probably going to need. If you're an artifact deck, you're going to get an artifact. It's cheap, it's effective, it is only sorcery speed, but still, I think whenever you're able to dig into your deck, you might be able to find some answers, or even if it's not artifact, you could go Planeswalker, and hey, why not? Next we have Krovak's Ascendant Hero. He's sort of the good version of Krovax in the lore. I highly recommend you look him up. I believe when he was evil Krovax, he loved torturing Squee, but as far as the creature goes, he's just amazing. Has an activated ability where you can pay 2 life to just return him to your hand, which is very rare. You don't see this a lot, especially with white cards. This is something you might see in blue. A lot of creatures in blue have activated abilities that will allow you to bounce them back to your hand, but you pay 2 life here, so it's a little bit better. You don't have to save up any mana, and he's basically an anthem for all white creatures and -1/-1 anthem for all non-white creatures. So if you love playing with anthems, if you love playing with a commander like Elish Norn, or if you want to use Krovax as a commander, going with anthems is amazing. There's already a ton of these in white. All you really need to do is just play some token support and you're good to go. Very fun deck. Next we have Drift of Phantasms. I love these transmute cards. There's a bunch of them. This one in particular is kind of cheap. It's just a common 3 mana. You can transmute it for 3. It's mono blue, so it can fit into more decks than some other transmute cards, and you can get any card that's 3 mana. So if you want to play in competitive EDH, this is even a card I would consider for that. While it isn't super efficient, it is 3 mana to get something like a Food Chain or a Necropotence. If you want to play casual, you could just go with a Rhystic Study, Rings of Brighthearth. There's a ton of good options that you can search up with. But yeah, pretty much a 3 mana tutor for all intents and purposes. Pretty good. The next we have Doomed Necromancer. This is a card that I really didn't know about until a few weeks ago. Been playing it in Aetherios. That deck is all about having creatures die, bringing them back to your hand, forcing your opponents to make decisions that they probably don't want to have to make. Paying 1 black, yeah, you do have to tap it, so it has Summoning Sickness, that issue, but still, you're gonna kill it off, bring a creature back from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is pretty good if you love things like Karmic Guide, if you love any creatures that are going to be bringing creatures back to the battlefield and not just to your hand. Doom Necromancer is probably the card for you. So many strategies in black, not just in Aetherios, but in Marinaclan Neltoth. You have so many incentives to want to sacrifice it, get creatures back. Amazing card. And the next we have Sadistic Hypnotist. You sacrifice a creature and then you have an opponent discard 2 cards, which is just a crazy awesome thing to have happen, especially if you pair it up with Nath of the Gilt Leaf, which is where it's most commonly seen with. It pretty much combos. You're going to get creatures every time your opponents discard cards. You can just keep sacrificing creatures until your opponents don't have any cards. It is sorcery speed, so you can't do that all the time, but still very powerful, and I would recommend putting it into just about every single black deck that uses like aristocrat abilities or just tokens, anything where you want to sacrifice them. The next we have Chain Reaction. Now, Blasphemous Act is a much better card because it's usually going to be 1 red mana or very few mana. This is 4 mana, and instead of just dealing 13 to each creature, it's going to be dealing a certain number equal to the total number of creatures on the battlefield, which is usually going to be just as good as Blasphemous Act. The only reason why it may not see as much play is because it's a permanent 4 mana unless you have cost reduction in other forms versus the 1 mana of Blasphemous Act, so it's usually going to get overshadowed, but it's still an amazing way to remove creatures in mono red, which you do have some good removal, but this is basically red's Wrath of God. You pretty much have burn spells in red that double as removal. I'm not really a big fan of that. If I'm playing burn spells, I kind of just want to use them to burn. I don't want to have to use them as removal. With chain reaction, it's just removal. The next card we have here is Triumph of the Hordes. Until the end of turn, creatures you control are going to get +1/+1, trample, and infect, which is just a crazy overrun type ability, which isn't even like overrun. Your creatures aren't going to be getting that much more power, but the reason why is because you're giving them infect and trample. So if you have any sizable creatures, they're likely going to kill off at least one opponent, give them 10 poison counters, say bye-bye. Love this card. I don't think it sees enough play. It sees play in some decks that are more specifically built around infect, using something like a Traxa. But if you're playing any deck that can go wide, you may not even need the trample at that point. Or even if you want to play Voltron, it still isn't even that bad because giving 1 massive creature trample infect +1/+1 is usually just as good as giving 20 creatures that are just 1/1s +1/+1 trample infect. So it's a good card. I think it's not just specifically good for one style of deck. As long as you're built around combat, I think it's pretty good. Next card is Hostagetaker. Now, for whatever reason, I don't think I see this card in Commander as much as it should be played. You have a way to exile a creature or an artifact. It's really problematic. Steal it in kind of a Banisher Priest, Oblivion Ring kind of way. The main upside here is that you do get to cast it, so it's not just a Banisher Priest. For creatures and artifacts, you get to take it and then cast it whenever you feel like it. Why am I bringing up this card now? Well, with the Aminatu Planeswalker Commander, I'm in love with the flicker mechanic and abusing it. Hostagetaker was one of the cards I immediately thought of when making an Esper Blink deck or flicker deck, whatever you want to call it. Being able to blink her, get something, cast it, blink her again, get another thing, cast it, is pretty awesome. Very good utility creature. And then the last card we have to talk about is Violent Ultimatum. It is 7 mana, and yes, the mana cost is awfully specific, but in a lot of Jund decks, you should have this mana available anyway. You can destroy 3 target permanents, which to me is crazy. You don't have to worry about Planeswalker or non-Planeswalker permanents or land or non-land permanents. You can hit pretty much anything you want to, and having the ability to select which 3 you want. It's not just one opponent's 3 permanents. It's not just a permanent from each of your opponents. It could be 3, it could be 2 from one opponent, it could be 1 from another. You could just single out one player, destroy 3 of their permanents if you wanted to, or you could just split it up evenly among your 3 opponents. It's a brilliant card, and I love removal, and I laugh every time I see something like this happen because it's super underrated. I think a lot of people look at the mana cost and think that it may not be super easy to cast, but if you do have the right mana fixing, it will almost always be good. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about these 10 underrated Commander cards. Void here signing off. See you all next video.